Everybody, welcome to Junkyard Theory. This is episode number 16, and today's guest is somebody who has directed over 80 episodes of television, 25 television movies, and 15 award winning features. His work is, well, I don't really have to say that anybody can kind of like identify. People basically love the TV series that he's done: Prison Break, The Mentalist, Lost, Agents of Shield, and so much more. He's recently directed an episode of Vivos for Netflix, and he is fresh off the tails of his independent film, his newest independent film. Well, welcome, Bobby Roth. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Happy to be here.
Happy to have you on board. So, Bobby, could you kindly, tell us a little bit about your origin story? How did Bobby Roth become a filmmaker?
Um, I had no business being a filmmaker. I come from a family that had nothing to do with the arts. And I often used to joke with my parents that we had no music in the house, we had no paintings, we had no love of museums. Um, but my mom loved Hollywood. And, uh, and I don't know why, because my dad was in the floor covering business and they didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up originally, and yet they seem to gravitate towards actors. I tell the story that my mother kept me out of school the day Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor opened, so I would go to see it with her. And I guess I grew up like a lot of kids in Los Angeles, just feeling like this was the center of the filmmaking world, Hollywood. And but I never imagined I'd be in it, and I just went off to college thinking I was going to go into my dad's floor covering business. And I was lucky because when I went to school was a particular time in history when the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, and the free love movement, and a lot of things were exploding for people my age. And I went off to Berkeley, which was a fairly radical university, and just saw more possibilities than floor covering. And I started to write and thought maybe I would be a novelist, but I wasn't very good at that, and I didn't like being alone all the time. And I somehow got the idea to go to film school and transferred from Berkeley to first USC Film School and then UCLA Film School. And I loved it. I just felt that for the first time I found something I thought I could really concentrate on and be good at. And in my last semester, my last quarter at UCLA, I didn't know that how hard it was to make a movie. So I just said, I'm going to make a feature film. And I had a story about a black couple that came to Los Angeles from the South, and they had a lot of troubles and they were trying to make a life for themselves. And the man went to work at a factory which went on strike, and he was politicized. And that was my story. And I somehow found the actors. I got little bits of money here and there, and finally I got an AFI grant to finish it. And I didn't know that you cannot just go to a big film festival. So on my own, I went to Cannes in 1976, and and didn't have a place to stay, didn't know anybody, didn't wasn't in the festival, and I found you could pay money and get screenings at the film market, and so I had two screenings, and for some reason the film resonated because it was so different. No one had made a political film about black workers in the United States at that time, or maybe there had been one just prior that my friend Bob Young made, uh, called Nothing But a Man, which was a great movie. But and I by just being different, I think I attracted attention, and the attention then kind of spurred me on and made me believe that I could do this. So I wrote another script called The Boss's Son, and I went out to raise money, not knowing how difficult that was. And I found I just, because I didn't know what I couldn't do, I kept doing it. And I found a number of wonderful actors who responded to the script. So I got Rita Moreno, who is now in her 80s and still going strong, to play the mother, and a great singer named Richie Havens, the guy that opened Woodstock, acted in it and did some music for me. And I made a movie that got very good reviews. And even then, I was still very naive. I didn't know what it meant to have an agent. And I was being pursued by two agents. And my dad knew one guy in the film business named Robert Town, who was a screenwriter who you guys might know from. He wrote Chinatown. He wrote The Last Detail. He wrote the final versions of Godfather. And Bob came and saw my movie and was positive and said, "You should go with this guy Mike Ovitz. He's forming this new agency called CAA." So I did, and that was sort of how my career got launched. Nothing really happened in features right away, but a guy that I had gone to school with became an executive at Universal, and I got a deal to write, direct, and produce over there. And I came up mostly as a writer. I wrote a lot of movies for television. Virtually none of them got made, but they all led to something else. And I went back to making an independent film in 1984. I did this movie Heartbreakers, which got a lot of attention critically, and I caught the eye of a big producer named Ray Stark, who had done everything from Annie to Funny Girl to The Way We Were, lots of big movies with Robert Redford and Barbara Streisand, and he, for whatever reason, he liked me, and through him I went on to make a movie called Baja, Oklahoma, which was Julia Roberts' first movie. Willie Nelson was in it. The lead actress was a woman named Leslie Ann Warren. And what I found always, and this is, I think, good for your younger viewers, work begets work. I like to work. I took everything that came my way usually. I wasn't I wasn't necessarily discriminating the way some people are. I liked writing my own movies and I liked directing for my own scripts, but I also like doing other people's stuff. So ultimately, I did a lot of movies for television, and when that market started to go away, I just wanted to keep working, so I started doing episodic television, and that's where I came to Prison Break and Lost and the shows that you mentioned earlier. And my motivation was just to keep working, you know. And I kept coming back to independent movies, and I always wrote my own. I did a little film called Jack the Dog. I did another film called Manhood, another one called Berkeley, and recently Pearl. And they're all funded by me. They're all my own stories. And luckily, through the commercial work I did, I met a lot of great actors, and they all helped me out because I can't pay them anywhere near. And Pearl, Anthony LaPaglia, who's a great actor who was the star of Without a Trace for many years, uh, did the movie virtually for free just to help me out. And
Wow,
and so that's how I keep going. And I hope I do more.
that's very inspirational. Like I like a few things that you said. Firstly, you mentioned that you didn't know what you couldn't do, and that kind of kept you going. And I kind of find like sometimes as a filmmaker, like when you start out, the fact that you don't know as much kind of helps you find out more innovative ways to get your stuff done. And how has that I mean with the experience that you've gained over time, how has that affected your career? Like, do you still find out like with technology changing and you probably don't really uh, you're not probably familiar with the tech, but do you find like the little ignorance that you have kind of helps you figure out different ways of doing projects?
Um, yeah, the tech counts for very little. I mean, we still have to tell a story. It usually is written first. and we see everything through a lens, whether we're shooting film or megabytes or whatever we're shooting, and so those principles, when I teach now, because I've teaching has become a much bigger part of my life. Uh, when I teach, I try to figure out what's still the same as it was when I was in my 20s and excited.
Hmm.
And the thing is, these things have become very important, and maybe too important, because I mean,
Yeah.
my only way of seeing movies when I was a kid was on the big screen, and that was great. But it was very hard to get them made. And, you know, I know a lot of people are still in love with the idea of shooting on film, but it was very hard. It was very expensive. Um, and, uh, and so much of your energy went just in getting the materials and the tools. But the good thing was, once you got a movie made, there were places to go. And today, I think it's very hard for young people, because how do you differentiate? How do you get anybody to read your script or look at your movie if you don't know them? I mean, it really is a business of who you know. Um, and it's also, I mean, I liken it to professional basketball. Uh, Not everybody can play in the NBA. And even though when you watch the games, it looks like there's a lot of guys, there might be 300 of them, but that's in the whole world. I mean, I've been kind of a critic of the most recent Academy Awards, because
I noticed your posts on social media, and that's when I kind of remembered, okay, Bobby's on my
yeah,
socials, so I got to
yeah,
talk to him right now.
I got in a lot of trouble because I took issue not with the filmmaking so much, somewhat, but of the storytelling. and and you know I just had trouble comparing something. Not that I don't think they're noble efforts, they're really noble efforts, but
Hmm.
I don't think the quality is there. And I think it's because I think it takes a long time to become a good filmmaker, and we seem to have been pushing out the older people, and not I saw a late night commentator talking about the United States, and how we treat older people. And whereas when I go to China, I'm respected for my age and for what I've
Hmm.
accomplished. And here, people just want you to get out of the way and make room for the new people. And I still think I learned a lot. It seems a shame not to share it. It seems a shame that I know I'm a better filmmaker and storyteller than I was 30 or 40 years ago. And I have this conversation with a number of people who were my age. And also it seems that the balance is shifting away from old white guys, but unfortunately, um, just because somebody is younger and more diverse and comes from a different background does not mean they have filmmaking skills. Those
Exactly.
those take a lifetime, you know.
True.
And I look at the people who helped me over the years, and I didn't mention this, and I should have in my original intro. Uh, Irv Kirshner, an older, experienced filmmaker, was a mentor. Robert Young is still a mentor. He's 96 this coming November, and he's still
Wow.
helping me. Um, I mentioned Bob Town to you earlier, the guy who wrote Chinatown, and Bob is in his 80s now. Costa Gavras, even though he was only in his 40s when I was in my 20s, he was an inspiration to me. He had made this amazing movie, Z, and he was president of the jury at Cannes. And he called me up and invited me to coffee when I was nobody, when I just had my master's thesis. And I got so much support from older filmmakers who really helped me. The writer Lillian Hellman, who was probably America's first great female playwright, taught me at Berkeley. I mean, I just had such a reverence for people who were older, which doesn't seem to be as prevalent today.
That's very true. That is very unfortunate. I mean, even I've learned like doing my master's thesis. Like I've had David Worth. He's I think pushing 80 right now, and
Hmm.
he kind of like took me under his wing, so I kind of resonate with what you're saying. And it's, I mean, yeah, with age does, age experience does come in really, and I don't think race or anything else for that matter should take precedence over uh, your filmmaking ability, especially when it comes to award season. So it is kind of
Yeah, I think
unfortunate.
it's half of it. Having a cultural background that you can share is great, and but you still have to know how to tell a story. And it's like I don't I don't I don't have any particular. Uh, I think I'm lucky that I grew up in a home. I grew up in a Jewish home, and my dad came from working class peasants who respected working people. So I look at the movies, and I'm trying to look just at the quality of the performance. I just thought what Andra Day did in the United States versus Billie Holiday was much more impressive than what Fran McDormand did on Nomadland as an actress. To me, it doesn't matter what color they are or what gender they are. I'm looking at the work, and it's so exciting to me to tell a story in a new way that people want to keep turning the page. I mean, that's what I teach. I teach that
It's
what's going to
entertainment, right?
exactly what's going to happen next is the most exciting thing. And of
Yeah.
course, it can be politically relevant. There's a great quote that I like from I became a Marxist in the '70s, as did a lot of my friends, and I've kind of gone all over the political spectrum. But there was a quote from this guy Karl Korsch who said, "It's not the role of art to change the political landscape. It's the role of art to prepare people psychologically to accept the change in the political landscape." And
Mm.
that was a good thing for me. I was trying to skip the stage and just make my art political. And it was failing because it wasn't reaching the hearts of people. You know, the good work, makes you feel something as well as think. So that's what I'm after.
True, 100%. There's also this quote I came across when I was watching your trailer for your own masterclass. You say this thing out when you are prepared, you're relaxed. Could you kind of like elaborate on that as a director?
Sure.
How does that
Well,
matter?
I think like a lot of filmmakers, I'm anxious about the more you know. In some ways, the more you know that can go wrong. And I teach this because if you do as much work as I've done over the years, almost everything has gone wrong. People don't show up, trucks break down, cameras break, it rains. I mean, I was in
Whatever
a
can go wrong will go wrong.
exactly Murphy's Law. And so what your job is as a filmmaker is how to keep going, how to take, because I think I like the inexactness of the arts, that it's never what you thought it would be. Hopefully, it's better, right? Sometimes not, but if you get too rigid in what your expectation is, you're not able. I think what I like about the art also is that it's so collaborative. And once you might have an idea of a character, but once the actor gets involved, now you have to share it. Your job is to intermesh with this other being, and together a character will come out of it. And it won't be the character that was on the page. It might embody what was on the page. Hopefully it embodies what was on the page, and hopefully it's better. but you have to allow for the creativity of others as a filmmaker. So some people get very nervous and anxious because there's so much pressure on it. And that's why I think the more you prepare, the more you think about what could happen, what the possibilities are, the more you investigate with others. I mean, I was just reading a great book by Sidney Lumet, the director who did Network and um, Hospital and 12 Angry Men, all these wonderful movies. And he had a whole chapter in his book about rehearsal. And it's what I've come to believe myself, how important it is. But what he did, which was great, which I had never seen done before, is he went through systematically what rehearsal should be, what he does the first day, what he does the second day, at what stage he brings the actors to the character, how much backstory to give the actors. It's very specific. And in that sense, I realized this guy is not just great because he's got some innate talent, he's got a methodology. The book is called Making Movies by Sidney Lumet, Lumet. And it's a wonderful book. And because he talks very conversationally about what the process of filmmaking can be. And I want to write a book. I've been trying to write a book for a long time, but I'm trying to think, what do I have to add to the conversation? What have I learned that's sort of unique to me that will help you? You know, so that's my process right now.
That's brilliant. I think we can certainly benefit from something if you're right, because that's going to be your own perspective. And just to add to that, like you mentioned, you talk about being prepared, but at the same time, I mean, when you work on TV, how much time do you get to prepare? Because it's the as far as I know, please correct me if I'm wrong. You don't necessarily get as much prep time as you probably would get on a feature film,
No,
because the schedules are very tight. So how
and
do you kind of manage
it's
that?
interesting because this is something one has to learn in terms of the difference between those two mediums. Um, you only get usually 7 days of prep on a network television show, and you get 7, 8, or 9 days to shoot it. So for me, the game is, how can you get more out of those 7 days? Well, first of all, you've probably been hired much further out than 7 days. So I'm always nudging to try to get my hands on the script, because a lot of people will tell you the answers are in the script, right?
Mm.
And in television, they don't really want directors to change the script much. They feel they hand it to you, and your job is to interpret it with directorial skills, not change the writing. So the earlier I try to get the script early, and I do a lot of imagination work, trying to just see it, you know. And often in television, you're aided by the fact that on a series, unless you're the first or second episode, the actors have already been doing those roles. And you've been able to see them in those roles, and you've been able to see the pilot, which is usually some indication of where they want to go. So it's very different than making a movie where you invent everything yourself. In television, you have to build on what's already been invented. And your job is to, I believe, your job is to make the best Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I can make, knowing what the producers and the executive producers want, at the same time making it as original and as dynamic as is going on inside of you. So that was what I had to learn, and it didn't happen overnight. That I came from making independent films, and I started out in television thinking, well, I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going to make. The first show I did was for Michael Mann, Miami Vice, many years ago, right? And I didn't think I needed to shoot close-ups because I thought they were dull. Now in television, you need to shoot close-ups for a number of reasons. Many reasons that I've learned since is that, first of all, the screen is smaller, so sometimes you need to get closer to make an impact, um, but most of the reasons are editorial, is that they need to be able to play with the pace, And to do that, you have to cut. And so the more interesting angles you can give them, the more coverage you can give, the more options they have to tell the story. And ultimately, it is the writer producers telling that story, and you give them raw material. You try to get the best performances from the actors and the most inventive shots, But when I was doing Prison Break, I knew those producers, and I had a bit of a good simpatico with them, that I was able to turn over footage that they would cut further and further themselves. Particularly, there was a guy who was the showrunner, Matt Olmstead, and I had a good, joking relationship because I was always fighting to be a director and have a director's point of view, but it's not a director's medium. Episodic television is definitely the producer's, writer's medium. And the way can get hired is by giving them what they need to make the best show they can do. And so on that show, I kind of got I was fortunate that my rhythm, my personal rhythm, the way I like to shoot, I like a lot of handheld, I like a lot of dynamics, um, uh, and I like the energy. And it seemed to fit with because I came on the show in the first year, and it was trying to find itself. And so I only did 2 the first year, but I did 6, which is a lot. It's about as much as you can do in any show. In the second year, and then 4 in the third year, and 4 in the fourth year. And I got really comfortable with the show. It was almost like I wasn't on the staff, but I got to know I did 14 hours of Prison Break with Wentworth Miller. You get to know an actor over 4 years. We got to
Yeah.
be pretty close. And the same with Dominic Purcell and Robert Nepper. And it just makes it so much easier. And I knew the ADs, and I knew, so it was almost like going back to my own set. And we didn't have, my job was just design the shots, pick the locations, pick the guest cast, and then, know how to get how to make Wentworth as comfortable as possible so he could do his best work. And, it's all psychology. No actors are the same. No 2 actors are the same. And in that show, it was really great because when you looked at the 2 leads, they couldn't have been more different in their approaches. Dom was very intuitive, and Went was very intellectual. In the end, they both did great work, and they worked great together. But they came at it from very different, points of view and backgrounds and training. And that's always going to be the case. So when you bring this cast together, you have to find the chemistry.
Mm.
It's everybody talks about chemistry as if it comes out of the heavens, and it sometimes seems that way. But in fact, you know, you have to know,
There's work that goes into it.
yeah. And you'll
Yeah.
see if you look at the documentary I was telling you about that I made with my son. I have 25 actors that I've interviewed, and they're all people I've worked with, and almost all of them I worked with more than once. And
So,
they're different.
Bobby, tell us
They're
a little bit
different.
about the masterclass. Like, where can people go watch it?
Yeah, I have I have a website called BobbyRoth.net, and on it you can see the trailer, and you can purchase individual episodes, or you can get the whole series. It's 10 episodes. They're all around 20 minutes, and they go all the way from imagination to script to casting to a couple of episodes of directing actors. The final episode is about the business, getting hired. And I got some great people, the head of William Morris Packaging, the head of ABC Drama, and I interview them about what they're looking for when they want to hire a director, and a number of showrunners from Prison Break, showrunners from Scorpion, showrunners from um, uh, not Agents of Shield, Lost, Carlton Cuse, who's great, who talks about that when you're directing a show and when you're producing a show like Lost, there's 400 people working at any given moment. That's a lot of people. And
That is, yeah.
you can't do all their jobs. You have to know a little bit about what their jobs entail and then how to best use them and work with them, and let them help you. Yeah.
So as captain of, the ship, how and you mentioned the whole, collaborative approach. This is something that pretty much every single guest who's come on the show has reiterated. The fact that it's the ultimate collaborative art form, filmmaking. So how do you kind of, get everybody to not necessarily, for lack of a better way of saying, I guess, get them to create your vision? Like, how do you get everybody comfortable and on the same page as you? Because on television you have multiple directors, right? And the crew
Yeah.
kind of like has to switch in between, uh, I guess, episode by episode. So it's a
Well,
drastic change, I guess.
my process always begins with watching what's come before. So if when I went to Lost, I didn't come to Lost until the third year. So there were 55 episodes done before I ever stepped on a set. And I know it sounds crazy, but I watched all 55 episodes in a 3-day period before I left for Hawaii because because that show in particular, the characters all had these very elaborate histories.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I got to know what what the character was first. And I hadn't met the actors yet. I didn't know a single one of them, except for Terry O'Quinn. He and I had worked together. We did his first television show was my first television show. So that was lucky for me. I knew one person. And it's always good to know one person who can tell other people, hey, give him a chance or give her a
Always, yeah.
chance. They're a good person. And then so I watched all the shows. I read the episodes from that year. And then I was very lucky. The first night I was in Hawaii and I brought my son. He just decided to use it as a vacation since I was not going to be in my hotel room, so he could have it. So he and a buddy of his came with me, and we're in a restaurant local near the hotel. And I look over, and there's Michael Emerson, who plays Ben, the villain of Lost. And what I knew because I had read the script, but Michael didn't know was the episode I was doing was all about him. It was his entire backstory, and I'm a little bit shy, so I was wanting to say hello to him, but I also wanted to protect his privacy and not impose. And my son says, "You got to go introduce yourself." So sometimes your kids can inspire you that way. And so I
Mm,
go over and I try to be gentle, not like a crazy fan. And he turns out that he's just this very accessible guy. He comes over, sits down at our table, and it was a great. I recommend this a lot that if you're going to a show, reach out ahead of time to the actors. Don't wait till you're on a set with them and all the pressure is on and you're rushing and their lighting is going on. Even if it's an email or a phone call, let them know you want to hear from them. Let them know you're open. Let them know you like their work and you're excited to be working with them. And above all, you have to read the script over and over and carefully be able to look at their arcs and do some of their work ahead of time so that when they ask you questions, they at least know not that you have the answer, but that you've considered the question.
gotcha.
And that's probably the most important thing I can share about filmmaking. It's a business of questions, not answers, questions. And even in my style of directing, when I want an actor to do something, I ask it as a question because I have respect for how difficult it is to just be a robot and do something, and how to hook into the motivation of the actor and their process, and know what their process is, how hard it is to be an actor, and how hard it is to say, okay, me, Michael Emerson, I would never do some of these horrible things that Ben does. That's his process, getting to the place where he understands why Ben does what Ben does. And and you go on that journey with them, you know. And with the good actors, it's a thrill. You know, if you've got Michael Emerson or Donald Sutherland or Diane Keaton or Jennifer Jason Leigh, all these great people I've been lucky enough to work with. I like going on this journey, helping them. You know, I did a movie with Laura Prepon. Uh, she was originally, a long time ago when she was a kid, she was in that 70s show, and then she went on to do Orange is the New Black. She was Alex in Orange is the New Black. And she was a very, I don't want to say she was underrated because I think a lot of people appreciate her, but I didn't know how good she was when we began. And as we were working, I realized I had to work harder because she was so good. I had to know what was possible for her so that I could suggest or help her, or I'm her mirror. I have to show
Mm.
her that she hasn't gone as far as she could go in this moment, or maybe she's gone too far and needs to pull back. That's my job, you know. And so
Yeah.
you're a little bit of a coach, and you're a little bit inspiring, and you're a little bit of a father, not in a paternalistic way, but in a supportive way, you know. And you either like that or you shouldn't be a director.
True. How often do you collaborate with other directors? Like, say, you have like the story, the basic arc for, let's say, this particular season. Certain things that you do, maybe certain creative decisions that you take could perhaps affect like how a character kind of like turns out like a few episodes down the line. How do you manage that? How often do you collaborate with other directors and writers? Like, how is that
Never,
process?
never.
That's
uh,
interesting.
in Unless the director is a producer director,
Hmm.
you almost never even talk. The only directors you ever see is like occasionally when you're in prep, you will see the director that's on the floor at that time, but they're busy, so you can't necessarily talk to them because they're
Hmm.
directing, and you can't really watch them because you're prepping and you've got that job to do. So um, there's very little collaboration between one director to another, and I think it's also led to, I don't want to say jealousy or envy, but a certain thing is, it feels sometimes, and this is not a good thing, but I'm being honest, it sometimes feels a bit competitive. You don't
Hmm.
want to do it exactly like somebody else did it. You want your way to be innovative and to bring something. Now, that doesn't mean you're not watching to see, interesting camera moves that you can steal, but, or, you know, but unfortunately, that feeling of camaraderie isn't usually there because people are competing because they want to be asked back. So you go into the first season. I'll give you an example. Agents of Shield. First season, there's 13 episodes. They had in the first half of the season. They have 13 different directors. Nobody gets two. They're trying to find out what their show is and who's good, right? So
Right.
then they ordered nine more to finish the season. The network likes the show, and the producers now they start asking back the best of those first 13. And
Hmm.
if you did a good job and if you found the show, um, which I did, then out of the next nine, they gave me two, and they gave one or two other people two, because they would like to have fewer directors. I mean, just so they just so they would know what they're getting, because some people can do it and some people can't, right? Prison Break. I was on Prison Break the first season, and I had done, I think episode 11 was my first one, and I'd done a good job. So I got asked back to do episode 19 out of 21 episodes I think we did, and a new guy who had not done it was doing episode 18. And he came, we were in the same hotel, we were in Chicago, and he came to me and he said, can I buy you a drink and can we talk about what it's like to work with these actors and stuff? And you want to help? Sure. And, but as I talked to him, I thought, oh my God, this guy's never directed anything. And I knew what was going to happen to him, which did happen to him. They chewed him up and spit him out. He had come from producing, he had never directed anything. That was the wrong show to start on.
God.
The actors didn't like him, the crew didn't like him. He was indecisive because he was scared, which we all are, and he didn't have, you know, I mean, the one good thing about being an older director that I love is I've been here before. I
Hmm.
go on anybody because it's tricky when you go to a new show. It's 100 people that know each other, and you're the only new person, and they judge you very quickly. They have to for their own protection. Can we trust him? Does the DP say, "Oh Jesus, I'm going to have to plan the shots," or does this guy know the shots? You know, the actors, they're protecting. This is a lot of money for them. Some of them,
Yeah.
you go to Hawaii 5 in the later years, like I did, and those guys are each making $250,000 an episode. They don't want you to fuck up their show. Uh, so if you show them that you know what you're doing and you've watched the show and you know their characters and you know the story that you're doing, you should know the episode that you're doing better than anybody because you've had it longer. The other people were all shooting the other show while you were prepping, and the people you're prepping with are going to be prepping the next person as soon as you go to shoot. It's your job to know that script backwards and forwards and listen to the writer producers as to what they want.
I remember telling you earlier before we kind of like went live that some of the episodes, that I've seen, basically Agents of Shield and Prison Break as well. The ones that you directed happen to be way more character centric, and I guess that kind of goes to show. Like, you mentioned this in your trailer as well. Put the camera where the story is.
That's a quote from my mentor, Robert M. Young, who did Alambrista, Nothing But a Man, Ballad of Gregorio Cortez. He's just a great, great American filmmaker, and that's what he taught me.
Yeah.
Is that you have a story to tell, but you can't tell it the way it is on paper. You have to use the other tools, the actors' tools, the director of photography's tools, the production designer's tools, the costume designer. They all they're all there to serve you, and especially when you go to a show like we already discussed my inability to be on board with everything, up on everything technical,
Yeah.
right? But there are people there that you need to interface with. When I went to Shield, there was a guy named Mark Kolpeck who was their visual effects guy, and he was a real filmmaker. He wasn't just a technical whiz who knew, visual
Hmm.
effects and he had this great gift that he was able to, if you listen to him, explain to you what could happen. And so instead of being intimidated by the effects, I started to think, what if we did this? I have a guy. His name is a wonderful actor named J. August Richards, who's in Pearl, who I met on Shield. He has to leap off the sixth floor of a building and land on the ground and not. And for me, it wasn't the visual effect that was so amazing. It was the combination of his character, who at once had a superpower, but also had the human aspects of, wow, I know what I just did. That's amazing.
Hmm.
And if he could do it in a realistic way, you add to the value of the science fiction. You don't take
Definitely.
it for granted. You bring in the human being that says, wow, I was just a normal man and now I can do something that no one can do. And, you know, it's just reminding Jay August about the humanity of it, and then also working with the visual effects guy to say at what point will we be in which shot, you know. So we have a guy running towards a balcony, and then we have him leap over a little balcony, a fake balcony that is not going to, and and we're like little kids. We have to believe in all this. We have to live that fantasy and believe it, and how hard should it be on Jay August's body when he lands from 6 floors
Mm.
up? And what does that do? And it's exciting because I'm thinking of the reality of it, and then Mark Kolpak is telling me how to do it, telling me get the camera here, maybe, and maybe you want to use slow motion here, not just the visual effect compacting of the shots, but letting me know what's possible. And that's the way we go back and forth. Questions. What if you did this? Want to try this? What
Wonderful.
happens here?
Yeah.
Questions. It's all a business of questions.
Moving on to Pearl, the most recent independent film that you did. Like you said before, you collaborated with people you've met during your career. How did you get this movie off the ground, and how has the reception been so far, and where can we watch it?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions.
Yeah,
Um,
sorry, you can pick
well,
anyone.
it starts with an idea. It's a personal idea. It's about a girl who loses her mother, a single mother, and finds out that the father that she thought had passed away before she was born is actually alive. And it's their relationship. And he didn't know he had a daughter. She didn't really know she had a father. And through the mother's death, and I use personal elements. My sister, unfortunately, was murdered many years ago by her husband. And so that's an element in it. But my sister had no daughters, and none of the actual stuff that's in the movie happened. But except for that, I took that event. And for some people, it's tough because it begins with a very violent act.
Mm.
And then uh, so I had the idea, I wrote it, I wrote many drafts. I did something that I've done before, which is very risky, which is that I had a character who was very young in the lead, Pearl. She's supposed to be 16 years old. And it, of course, makes casting difficult and super important. And I know when I'm casting that movie that if I don't find the right girl, nothing else I do is going to matter. And and I knew the lead character really is sort of the girl and it's sort of the father. And with all the adult roles, I didn't open it up to wide casting. I handpicked people I'd worked with. Anthony, I've worked with Anthony since 1990. We did a movie when we were both much younger. I worked on his series. I did a couple of episodes of his series. He was in one or two of my little movies that like this, Jack the Dog and Manhood. And I think we had an affection for one another. We had an understanding. We both have daughters ourselves that at the time we did the movie were the age of the girl. So I already had a connection. And so the hard part would have been raising, the 3, 4, 5 million dollars that I needed to make the movie. So I kind of circumvent that aspect, that element of the game by putting up my own money and making it for very little money because I don't have enough money to make a $5 million movie. Um, and but so I put up my own money. I pulled a bunch of crew people, and on that movie, I was able to mix. So I couldn't get my regular cameraman who shot Manhood and Berkeley doesn't live in L.A. Didn't have the money to give me 5, 6 weeks for free, but he had a son. And his son, who was working in lighting and wanted to be a DP, jumped at the chance to DP a feature. And to protect myself, I asked my friend John Bartley, who was this veteran DP who did the X Files and he did Lost, and he's just an incredible man, and my age. And I said, "Can you come and kind of mentor Chris and just kind of?" And I thought he'd come once or twice, and he ended up coming every day. He was on my set every single day, and not imposing. He'd have a cup of coffee, he'd watch Chris, he'd go, "That's good, that's good, that's good.
Hmm.
What if you tried this?" Once again, questions. and they it was a beautiful collaboration between an older guy and a younger guy, and the same way Anthony, who was a veteran actor in his 50s, or I guess now in his 60s, was helping Larson, who played Pearl. That
Mm.
here's a girl who's never had the lead in a movie, especially like this, and she's working with, but she's game, she's energetic, she's quite obviously beautiful. But her best asset was her ability to connect with Anthony and his ability to connect with her. And he was great with her. He supported her. He would tell me they needed more time when he didn't need more time, but he felt she needed more time. And I respected that. And they developed a kind of father daughter kind of thing, even though he has his own daughter and she has her own father. Uh, and I felt it really came across in the movie. And I'm a great believer in rehearsing and in actors really bonding. And that's the fun of making independent films, which you don't get in television. The actors on a series bond because they can be together for years, but you don't get to be there with them for years.
Mm.
And that was the fun of doing Pearl and doing Heartbreakers. I rehearsed 4 weeks with Nick and Peter Coyote on Heartbreakers. Um, I'm a great believer that the closer people get and the more they understand one another, the better work they can do.
Definitely. It's nice to hear, about the whole fact that you have these older people on the crew who kind of like mentor the younger generations. I think that's a very important aspect when it comes to pretty much any industry. Like you need that to happen rather than kicking out the old people, like you said before. So
No, and it
I
happened in
yeah.
many places. The head makeup woman from Lost came, and she was there almost every day, Emily Katz, and she mentored another woman who was working on our set every day because I don't use a lot of makeup. I don't have the time or the resources, and but she insisted, and I listened to her because I'm smart enough to know that she knows more about this than me. When we needed it and
Hmm.
what we needed, and even though sometimes I'm in a hurry on a little movie because we shot Pearl in 17 days, um, that
17 days.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
fast.
No, we work very fast, and we only work 10-hour days. I don't work 12-hour days because 10 hours is plenty. And then we went to France, and I trusted another guy, and his son was the DP in France for a couple days in France, and it was just it's always a little bit magic that you can do this. They don't look as difficult to make as they are, and that's as it should be. But making a movie for that kind of budget, with that quality that I'm striving for is a challenge, and I've always loved doing that more than the movies I've had. I've done movies where I had money, and sometimes they came out good, and sometimes they didn't. But it's not. There's a very different energy. You know, I did a
Sure.
number of movies, particularly Manhood in Berkeley with my own son. And it's a gift. It's just, I love working with him because I feel like he's learning and growing, and now he doesn't need me. He's a writer in his own right and a filmmaker. But that that excitement of watching somebody experience, watching Larson grow as an actress in just a 3 week period was really fun. You know, she's great. She's a great spirit, and she worked as hard as anybody I've worked with. To be good. That's what's fun.
Ordinary television versus streaming, because I want to touch upon this as well before we kind of go into the audience questions. Uh, what do you think is kind of like the main difference, and where do you see the whole landscape, the storytelling landscape going with streaming coming into play?
what I've found is it's sort of become. I always, when I was doing episodic, I always liked. There were basically two kind. There was the procedural, where the story gets wrapped up in a week, and then there was the ongoing stories. And one of the things I liked about Lost and Prison Break too is that they were sequential. So now
Hmm.
these this new genre of visual storytelling comes on us, the streaming show, and like you watch Ozark or you watch Queen's Gambit or you watch Normal People, and what's great is these people get to develop their characters over longer periods of time. You know, that's why like when I was watching even normal TV, like Mad Men, I loved Mad Men. There were only a million people watching it, but I liked watching John Hamm's character and Elizabeth Moss's character. There were two actors I'd worked with um, earlier in their careers. I hired Elizabeth Moss when she was 12 years old. So to watch her go on from Mad Men to Handmaid's Tale
Yeah.
to top, the stuff the work she's done, it's thrilling. And but what I really love is like they have more chance to develop those characters, and the inventive ones like John or Elizabeth or Joe Fiennes is a friend of mine. I worked on Flash Forward with him to watch him in Handmaid's Tale, and he's one of the sweetest people I know, and he's an absolute villain in that show. Uh, just to get to see them week in and week out, and especially now that we don't have to wait weeks in between, that you can watch. I had a little operation several years ago, and I'd saved a TV show that there were 13 episodes of it, and I watched them all in 2 days. And it's pretty fun to immerse yourself, and it's different than just watching a movie. You know, when you have
True.
8 hours to tell a story, or I just watched my friend Nestor Carbonell, who's my really close partner. He plays both Jack the dog and Manhood. He's the lead, and we've also done a lot of TV, Lost, and he's in this series called The Morning Show
Hmm.
on Disney. And I binged it. I watched it all in 2 days, and I don't know how many episodes it was, but it was a lot of episodes. And those characters were in my head. It's a much more, um, you know, with. I used to love the show Seinfeld, but it was only you had to watch it every Thursday, and it's only a half an hour, and you'd love it, and then you would be gone out of your head in a couple of days. These shows, I mean, there's a beautiful show. If your people haven't seen Normal People, it's a little show
It's
in
brilliant.
Ireland. Have you
I
seen it?
love
You
it.
have, obviously,
Yeah.
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 And it seems so simple, doesn't it? I mean, but the delicacy in those performances and the connection those people have with each other and to their characters, it's, you know, uh,
Feels
that's
like an
what,
experiment about human nature almost. It's
yeah.
brilliant. It's a brilliant piece of filmmaking.
And unfortunately, I mean, I was so vocal about the Academy Awards because I take my Academy Academy membership seriously. So I watched 70 films, and
Wow.
that's what I was looking for. And that was half of what was there. There were, I think, there were 200 films on the app that they give you, but I didn't see that. I saw it in fits and starts, and some of the characters, I thought what Carey Mulligan did in Promising Young Woman was great, and there were
Hmm.
other, obviously Anthony Hopkins, what he did, but they don't get the chance to really do what somebody on a streaming show can do over hours and hours and hours. I'd never seen the woman in Queen's Gambit before, and she was mesmerizing. You know,
Yeah. I think it's all about you spend more time with that character, and not just the actor, but so does the audience. Because when you
Yeah,
can, basically sit down and watch or binge something for 8 hours at a stretch, you yourself, you're invested in what happens to them.
yeah.
So
And
yeah.
if you ask what's the difference, it's basically that you're still telling a story, and
Mm,
it's going to be ultimately as good as the writing and as good as the acting.
true.
I mean, when I was working with, I was lucky. I did 3 different series with Stephen Bochco, who's one of the great television producers of the history of television. He created, L.A. Law and NYPD Blue and Hill Street Blues, and Stephen would prep with you, and at the end of prep, he was going to let you go, and he always let you go with the same admonition. He'd say, "Don't fuck it up." And you knew what that meant as a director is that don't try to do something that the show isn't. Know what the show is,
Mm,
and get the best from the actors, get the best from your crew, tell the story the best way you can, you know. And that's kind of sacred, that when that's handed to you to do, you know, it's your char so prepare, prepare, prepare.
yeah.
Think about it. Go to the locations. Look, what's possible? What are the advantages of this location? What are the disadvantages of this location? Watch the work of the actors. What have they done before? Where are their weaknesses? Um, Listen to them. Listen to your crew. Listen to people. When they're telling you something, what are they really saying? You know, Sometimes the AD will tell you something about an actor. You should listen because that AD has been watching that actor sometimes for years.
Mm,
If you go to
yeah.
Grey's Anatomy, as I did in the 8th year of the show, or the 9th year of the show, whatever, and I was on it for 3 years, um, they tell you something about Patrick Dempsey, listen to them. They've been watching Patrick Dempsey for 100 episodes of television. He's going to be that
Yeah.
guy, and he was. Sorry, there was a question that popped up.
Yeah. I think you were kind of answering that. So, how did you manage to run events smoothly in Prison Break, Mentalist, and School? I think we kind of covered this, but if you could
Well,
just
I will
say
say
it in
this.
sentence.
There were some shows that I did better on than others. Prison Break was kind of, it's one of those gifts where you connect that my personal style, what I liked, was the style of the show. So I fit in really well. With The Mentalist, I genuinely love the top tier of people, the showrunner, Bruno Heller, the line guy, the line producer, the Chris Long, the producing director. They were all great and supportive. I didn't get on as I don't think many people could as much with the star. Um, he was a difficult guy. He thought he knew more than everybody. He there was no real question of directing him except kind of steering him. And and his belief was any idea he had walking from the trailer to the set was better than my 7 days of prep. And so I didn't I did one good episode, and then I didn't do as well on the second one. And there were extenuating circumstances which I don't need to go into, but it wasn't as good a dynamic. And on Scorpion, I got along great with people. Nick Santora was running that, I knew from Prison Break. That's also one thing that's good about getting older is that by the time you're my age, there are very few sets you're going to walk onto where you don't know somebody. And it's scary to be the new person, whether you're a woman or a man. When you walk onto a set and 100 people are looking at you for questions and answers, it's you either thrive on that or you don't. I mean, I like it. I mean, I like the challenge of it. I like what it does to me inside. It gets me going. And I don't want to let them down. And so, you know, the night before, you know, you're nervous. You're having trouble sleeping. You're thinking, what if they don't like me? What if I suddenly forget everything I've learned over the last 30 years? It doesn't happen, but I mean, those are your fears.
They have a question in all caps. I don't know if you. Is there going to be a new season of Prison Break?
Two things. One is I'm out of that loop, so anything I would tell you would be just conjecture. So I'm not in touch with whoever it would be that would be making that decision because I don't know if it's Fox or something. Uh, I do know the actors, and nobody is indicated. I mean, I'm still good friends with Robert Nepper. I still Dominic Purcell is in my documentary, and he's a great guy. I talk to Went very rarely, maybe once a year. I haven't heard anything from anybody to indicate there's anything new with that coming.
Gotcha. When the director changes for different episodes, do they bring their own crew or is it the same crew for every director?
It's the same crew, and I think this is true of every. I mean, I'm not allowed to bring anybody, even an assistant. I mean, that is your task to fit in with the existing people, because when they start a season, those people are hired for the whole season. And just real quickly, I'll give you the people. There are usually two different first ADs because one's prepping while one's shooting, and they rotate back and forth. So you get
Hmm.
one of those two. If some shows only have one DP, which is for me problematic, who's there on the set all the time, and then they never prep with you, so that's not as good.
Hmm.
But then most of the bigger shows, like Lost, had two DPs. Certainly, Agents of Shield had two DPs. They rotate, so one of them preps with you and goes through it with you, and that's just makes you more relaxed. It's a little tricky if you haven't gotten, and if you go to a show like Without a Trace only had one DP, and so what they would do though to try to help is on your tech scout day, that guy would leave the set, and another and their camera operator, their A camera operator, would move up to DP for that day, and you would get the real DP would go on the scout with you. So at least you had one day of prep, and that DP got to see all the locations because it's your tech scout to know what material, what. Some shows weren't smart enough to do that. Sometimes they just would bring like a gapper or a best boy, and then that person would tell the DP what lights they thought they needed. It's much better. The best shows for me were like I enjoyed Revenge. I did Revenge. Uh, I think I did six of them over a period of like 3 years, and
Hmm.
I worked with both their DPs. They were both good. Cynthia Puchek, who is really I haven't worked with many female DPs. She was fantastic, and John Smith became my very close friend, who was the other one. So I love going back to that show because also the ads were friends of mine too. Jennifer Wilkinson uh, was one of them, and she was just great to work with. And so it was. I mean, for me, it put to rest the myth that gender is very important in these jobs. It's just not. I mean, it's the individual person. So Jennifer always worked. She rotated, so she worked with Cynthia, and Brian. I'm forgetting his last name, was the AD that worked with John, and I didn't. I mean, you might think I would have a preference as who I got, because when you're hired, you aren't hired by a script. You're hired by a number. So
Hmm.
you're gonna at this year you're gonna do episode 6 and episode 9. You're gonna have two different crews because they always go
Yeah,
odd.
parallel.
And then the editors, there's three usually because they need that many because post is behind. So that's a complete crapshoot. Maybe you're getting a great editor, maybe you're not. And if you get a great editor, you feel much better because they're going to save you, because editors always save you.
Yeah.
And so that's the way it goes. But you don't bring anybody of your own. And with the exception of the AD and the DP, the crew stays the same. The production designer works with you in prep. You never see them again once you start shooting because they're prepping with the next person. You know,
True.
good.
And some more. How did you deal with self doubt early on in your career, and how would you advise someone not to let it show on
Uh,
set?
Good question. I confess to this is not anything I'm proud of. I had probably too little self doubt in my. I thought I was really better than I was, and I just plunged forward thinking I knew what stuff that I didn't know, and luckily, as the reality caught up with me, what I didn't know, I was learning more and more, and learning to depend on people. So when I got to make Heartbreakers, which was my fourth feature, and I'd been, out of school for I think like 10 years. Um, I knew to hire this. I hired this fantastic DP, probably one of the best DPs in history, Michael Ballhaus, who would I had seen. I like foreign films a lot, so I had seen all these films he had shot in Germany for Fassbinder. He had done 13 of Fassbinder's movies, and I heard he was in New York. I don't know how I met him, and I talked to him long distance, and we got along great. And I had this movie Heartbreakers, and I sent him the script, and he just got it. He got the script, even though he was from Berlin. He got my sense of humor. I'd written the script. He got my sense of humor. He came out to LA, and it was a love fest. He was just the best. He was fast. He was brilliant. He was supportive. He was very into actors. His mother had run a school for actors, and more than any DP I've worked with before or since, he was really into performance. We would drive to the set every day together. We would drive home together every night, and he almost never talked about lighting or camera. It was always about performance because that was what he felt was important. And he could figure out if he knew what they were doing, and he did because we had a lot of rehearsals.
Mm.
He would he would show up at the rehearsals and study the actors and stuff. And it was just incredibly helpful in terms of how to light them, how to stage your scenes, what they could do. Um, and that's what he would talk about. One day we were driving to the set, and he says, "I'm worried about Nick." And and I didn't know what he meant. And he was talking about one of the leads, Nick Mancuso, and he said, "I don't know about if he played this." And he was talking my job, but I got a kick out of it because that's how you want people to. You want people to
Mm.
care. You want people to be that engaged. You know, and somebody else might have said to him, "That's not your problem. You worry about the light." But I was just thrilled that he was a collaborator with me. You know,
And that's what you always need. Yeah.
yeah, and he knew what the story was, so then we would work together on camera, and he liked to keep the camera moving, but in this story, I wanted to keep it moving with the characters because I didn't want it to be distracting from what they were going through, and it was just a joy.
So how would you like, not let self doubt kind of overwhelm you on set? Like, how would you not let it show? I think that's the latter part of the question.
Well, that I'm back to prep, 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 prep.
Right.
Director prepares. The more prepared you are, the more you've thought about it, the more confident I think you'll feel because you've thought it through. So when someone says, "Why are you putting?" I was on Lost was a funny experience for me, especially the first one. It was a very big episode because it was supposed to be the finale, that script, and then they had added two more shows. So instead of the producing director, my friend Jack Bender, directing this episode, it fell to me. So luckily for me, Jack and I have been best friends since we were babies. Our mothers went to high school together. And neither of us came from film families, and we both ended up being directors. But Jack is a very confident guy, and this was the third year of a show, which was very successful, and he was the only producer in Hawaii. All the other ones were back in the mainland. So uh, even though he knew by that time I was pretty good, he still was nervous, because what if I fucked it up? So we were on the set one day, and he's been in LA, and I've shot 8 days of my 10-day episode. So I'm now feeling comfortable on the set. And suddenly we're shooting a very important scene, and he's there saying, "Why are you putting the camera there?" And it was intimidating because it's his show and he's my boss, even though he's my friend. And I told him why. Oh, no, I didn't tell him why. I said, "Well, where would you put it?" And then he had a different place. And I said, "I can do that." And he says, "Well, no, why? I don't want to tell you how to do it." Even though, of course, he did. And and I said, "Well, I put it here," and I gave him my reasons because I feel it's this character's scene, and I want to play it, more from this character's point of view. And he had the camera more in the middle. And what it taught me, which I already knew, but it showed me was there are more than one way to do it right. Everything he was saying was plausible, and his episodes are great. He's a great director, and I enjoy his work, watching his work. But my work is different. It's not better or worse, and it's not wrong or right. It's just different. It's me. And in the end, I shot it the way I wanted to shoot it, and it came out great. But if he had been there, he would have shot it a different way, and it would have been
Yeah.
probably great, you know. And so at that moment, I was a bit intimidated because you don't like having to explain yourself to the boss because you know that the boss is intimating that there's a better way to do it.
Yeah.
But I had to find that dance between sticking to my, if I just capitulated, then I would have been weak and looked bad in that way. And if I said too aggressively my way, then it would look like I wasn't listening. So you have to find that,
Sure.
dynamic.
Can you tell us more about your documentary? So I think before we wrap up, Bobby, could you tell us where can again you
Yeah,
did mention this before.
Bobby
Where can you
Roth,
watch?
BobbyRoth.net, and it's called A Director Prepares, Bobby Roth's masterclass, and it's got 10 episodes. And the first one is about imagination. The second one is about the script, and all of this in relation to the director. The third one is about shot design. The fourth one is casting. Five is about time management. Six is about collaboration. Seven and eight are about directing actors because I needed 2 episodes for that. Nine is about editing and post production. And the 10th one, which I still believe is the most important for most of us, it's about getting hired to business and seeing how you're looked at by the people above, the
Sure.
showrunners, the studio agents.
And where can we watch Pearl?
Pearl, as far as I know, and I don't know outside of the US how easy it is to get yet. It's on iTunes for those of you who get. It's on Amazon. It's on Vudu. It's on all these page. It hasn't moved to the non-pay sector yet. I hope it will in the next couple months become available on non-pay platforms right now. But I think it's pretty reasonable. I think you can watch it for $4. Did that answer the question?
I guess my feet kind of froze for a minute.
Yeah, I saw you. I thought either you're very still or you're
Yeah,
frozen.
I was frozen, but I think that was there. Hopefully, it's caught up in the recording, so it's all good.
Okay.
Awesome, cool. So I guess that's all the time we got for today. Bobby, thank you so much for
Thank you, Akash.
joining. Let's hopefully do this sometime again. People, that is Bobby Roth. So till next time, this is Junkyard Theory.
Thank you.